thing he was about to do was open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labor camp. Winston fitted a nib into the pen holder and sucked it to get the grease off. The pen was an archaic instrument, seldom used, even for signatures, and he had procured one, furtively and with some difficulty, simply because of the feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib instead of being scratched with an ink pencil. Actually, he was not used to writing by hand. Apart from very short notes, it was usual to dictate everything into the speakwrite, which was of course impossible for his present purpose. He dipped the pen into the ink and then faltered, just for a second. A tremor had gone through his bowels. To mark the paper was a decisive act. In small, clumsy letters, he wrote, April 4th, 1984. In George Orwell's classic novel, 1984, the written word is all but banned. In this society, there's a tool called a speakwrite that records the user's verbal words and transcribes them automatically. We only ever see this tool used in the context of Winston's job. In the quote that I just read, Winston was handwriting in a diary that he procured in an antique store. This is significant as the act of writing with your hands is seen as a capital offense worthy of the death penalty. But the question is, why? The use of the speakwrite and other tools and systems within the context of 1984 are a means to control the general population. In this world, every move you make is monitored. Big Brother is always watching, and writing by your hand is something that can't be constantly surveilled. Thus, the invention of the speakwrite. This tool not only takes away one's ability to write with your hands, but it's also a recording device meant to surveil your every move and all conversations happening around it. In this world, handwriting is a dying art, and that's why Winston's choice to pick up a pen and paper and a diary and start writing in it is seen as rebellious and decisive. Simply by picking up this pen and paper, Winston is defying Big Brother and the systems in which he lives. Hi! Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing writing with your hands. Recently I started reading 1984 by George Orwell for the very first time. I didn't read it in school. Given our circumstances, I wanted to brush up on my banned book knowledge, and I decided to start with 1984, mostly because I love The Hunger Games. And in the newest installment, Sunrise on the Reaping, Suzanne Collins quoted Mr. Orwell in regards to implicit submission. One thing that really stuck out to me while I was reading this book was the use of the speakwrite and why physically writing with a pen and paper was forbidden. I'm not gonna lie, the sentiments in 1984 eerily mirror today's sentiments about handwriting. With the invention of the typewriter and technology, I understand why. But I'm here to make the case for why you should handwrite more. But before I get into the reasons, I just want to start off with a brief history. I mean, this wouldn't be a video essay if I didn't bring you back to the beginning of human civilization and talk about how we got here today. So, travel back with me to the beginnings of human civilization. As societies evolved, so did the need for communication. And before there was written communication, there was verbal communication. According to Robert Ornstein and Sally Mallam, quote, between 45,000 and 35,000 years ago, genetically modern humans achieved what anthropologist Marvin Harris calls a cultural takeoff, which was mostly propelled by the linguistic takeoff. Speech was the hot new thing, and thank goodness, because how else were you going to tell your caveman boo the hot new goss? Once speech got its bearings and people were able to communicate, stories, myths, rituals, and cultural norms began to take root and were passed down to the next generations verbally. But as societies developed further, so did the needs for a new form of communication. Simple drawings became pictographs, and those pictographs became standardized and formed into the beginnings of what we now call as handwriting. So I think this is a good time to fully define what it is I mean when I say writing. In the study, The Neuroscience Behind Writing, Handwriting versus Typing, Who Wins the Battle by Morano et al., They define handwriting as, quote, a complex neurophysiological process integrating motor, cognitive, and emotional components. There are two forms of writing systems. We have alphabet-based writing systems and hieroglyphic-based writing systems. So alphabet-based writing systems are a small set of symbols, also known as letters, that combine to form words. Hieroglyphic-based writing systems are a complex, visually distinct system of symbols that represent an idea or a word. An example of alphabet writing systems are English, Spanish, French, Italian, etc. And an example of hieroglyphic-based writing systems are Chinese, ancient Egyptian, Korean, Japanese, things like that. So, around 3000 BCE, our fave early civilization, Mesopotamia, developed cuneiform. The early Egyptians developed their hieroglyphics in 2800 BCE, and the precursor to kanji Chinese was developed in 1800 BCE. All of these were hieroglyphic-based writing systems because the transition from pictographs to these writing systems was fairly recent. But you can see early forms of cuneiform that are just kind of straight up pictures. And then the later forms of cuneiform are more like script, which I think is really cool. Fast forward to the Roman Empire, and this is where we get Latin, the basis of many languages that we still speak today, as we all know. After the fall of the Roman Empire, penmanship became specialized and was primarily used in a religious context. I want you to sit down and think about handwriting the Bible for distribution across Europe. Just think about that. In the 8th century, Charlemagne, king of Franks, king of hot dogs, and Christian emperor of the West, ordered for the standardization of the current writing systems, and he employed an English cleric named Alcuin of York. Sorry, that took me 5 ever to figure out how to pronounce his name. It's Alcuin of York, developed oh my god!
Carolingian.
These words are kicking my ass right now. Carolingian minuscule. I got it. Clap for me. Carolingian minuscule. Okay. So according to history.com, lol, Carolingian minuscule was designed for maximum legibility. Carolingian minuscule was designed for maximum legibility, and it featured lowercase letters, word separation, as well as punctuation marks. In the Middle Ages, denser forms of writing evolved to gatekeep the craft. Shocker. And handwriting, as well as elegant handwriting, became a status symbol. And by the 1700s, penmanship schools had began educating people on how to become master scribes. In the mid-1800s, Platt Rogers Spencer, an abolitionist and bookkeep, attempted to expand American penmanship by formulating a cursive writing system that is known as the Spencerian method. This was quickly adopted by schools and businesses and became the dominant form of writing in the 20th century. As typewriters and word processors swept the business world, many U.S. schools began to eliminate penmanship classes, and by the 80s, many U.S. children had received little formal training in terms of penmanship. Nowadays, penmanship studies haven't completely been erased from U.S. schooling systems. However, a lot of today's students spend more time mastering typing and computer skills rather than the neat standardized cursive of the 20th century. In fact, some schools, and this is shocking, it shocked me to my core, some schools have introduced computers as early as preschool. I'm going to let that sink in. Preschool! Meaning that children are now learning to type before they can even write, which is absolutely insane. Now that we're caught up to the present day, where does that leave us? Well, I have to talk about AI. In 2022, we are all aware, OpenAI launched a generative chatbot called ChatGPT, and since then, students across pretty much all grade levels are using it, and it feels like nobody can think for themselves anymore. So how does this connect back to handwriting? Well, with the accessibility of these AI chatbots, some education professionals are looking for a way to ensure that their students are actually learning and not just cheating their way through school, and that means the comeback of the handwritten essay. So I was in high school from 2014 to 2018. We were issued a school laptop where most, if not all of our assignments were to be done. yeah, I was on Canvas. Sorry for that jump scare. I also had to use it in college, which surprised me, but I hear you, fellow Canvas users. But yeah, I was in a program where at the end of the year, we had to take a test that was proctored off campus where no technology was allowed. So yes, that means that I had to handwrite 4 to 5 essays that were timed, and it hurt bad. My hand was cramping. But was I prepped for it? Yes. And that's because my instructors knew it was coming and they factored that into our test prep. So right now, about 2/3 of high school and college instructors are rethinking their assignments in response to AI. I mean, the New York Magazine just came out with an article called "Everyone is Cheating Their Way Through College." And one surefire way to make sure that people aren't just copying and pasting from ChatGPT, bring back the handwritten essay. Now, I can see the skeptics and AI lovers rolling their eyes. Don't you know that they can just handwrite whatever ChatGPT spits out? Yes, I know that. And I also understand that typing is more efficient and it's faster. But have you ever considered the benefits of handwriting? Okay, so this is a really dense section, so don't forgive me for looking down at my notes every now and again. It's dense as hell. In this section, I'm going to be using the Neuroscience Behind Writing, Handwriting versus Typing, Who Wins by Morano et al. I mentioned this study earlier in the video, and I just wanted to give it another shout out because this was an incredible resource for this video. So this study's aim was to, quote, assess whether handwriting and typing share common brain circuits or whether brain activity differs while they are being performed. Ultimately, they found that, quote, handwriting activates a broader network of brain regions involved in motor, sensory, and cognitive processing. Typing engages fewer neural circuits, resulting in a more passive cognitive engagement. That's essentially the whole study right there. But I want to dive in a little deeper into the differences between handwriting and typing. For starters, handwriting is a, quote, highly precise act of fine motor skills that humans acquired through extensive learning and maturation over time. Don't crucify me in the comments. Since handwriting is a skill, that means it can be unlearned. So it's a use it or lose it type of thing. Typing, quote, involves the selection of preformed characters via a keyboard, relying on distinct motor processes, including procedural memory and repetitive finger tapping, rather than the continuous manual tracing of letter forms. So typing came about with the introduction of typewriters, as we discussed earlier in this video, and it stressed the importance of gross motor skills over fine motor skills. This form of communication, meaning typing, also further abstracts communication and it reduces the cognitive load. So I want to get into the differences between traditional writing, digital writing, and then typing. Traditional writing with a pen and paper engages your fine motor skills and proprioceptive feedback because it is a physical act. You're having to coordinate your head, your brain, your hand, remember what those letters look like, and then also adhere to the limits of the sheet of paper that you're writing on. That is so much sensory information and so many variables to be taking account of. So handwriting is like really complex. Digital writing with a stylus and a screen or a tablet, whatever you want to call it, it modifies this interaction by taking the basic nature of handwriting. However, it feels smoother and it introduces distinct haptic features and feedback mechanisms like vibrating, pinging, noises. You know what haptic feedback is. And my boyfriend actually showed me this crazy thing that the iPad does where you can handwrite with an Apple Pencil on like your notes app, but it'll take your handwriting and it fixes it. So I'll insert a clip here. Essentially what happens is it kind of reduces your handwriting and it fits it within predetermined lines, and it can also like autocorrect, I believe. So it's kind of the best of both worlds situation if you're looking for something where you can handwrite, but it's also efficient and quick, like typing. I'm going to talk about this feature later on in the video, but spoiler alert, I do not like it. But cursive and print handwriting also affect the brains. Oh my God, affect the brains? You have multiple brains? That's crazy. They affect the brain in different ways. So cursive, being more fluid and continuous, activates regions in your motor cortex as well as your cerebellum. And the fluidity of the motion helps with memory retention and cognitive engagement, as it teaches the writer, it teaches the writer to anticipate the next letter in a continuous motion. Print has been found to engage discrete motor functions and the planning processes. Writing by hand with pen and paper has been found to strengthen memory and learning through what we know as the encoding effect, because the effort made to form the letters allows your brain to process the information in a slower manner, which then in turn helps you to process the information, and it helps with comprehension of the content. However, the study did note that, and this is a beefy quote, so stick with me here. Quote, although handwriting is frequently associated with improved memory retention, this effect may to some extent stem from cognitive engagement required for the aesthetics and graphical aspects of letter formation rather than the semantic processing of content. The attentional focus of visual and stylistic elements such as letter shape and spatial connectivity may impose an additional cognitive load that could inadvertently divert cognitive resources away from the comprehension and encoding of core information content, potentially diminishing rather than enhancing retention. Big ass quote. So basically, if you're worried too much about like your penmanship and the aesthetics in which your writing looks like, it may draw attention away from the content itself and you're gonna end up remembering less of it. So just keep that in mind. As far as typing is concerned, it's way more passive than handwriting. Users are more likely to transcribe word for word what is going on instead of processing the information, taking it in, and writing it in their own words. Since typing is instantaneous, you can just transcribe what's going on. Wrapping up this section, I wanted to leave you guys off with a couple of quotes from the study regarding handwriting and typing. Starting with the handwriting quote. Quote, the effortful nature of handwriting, which requires the formation of each letter and the integration of visual, motor, and cognitive processes, enhances the brain's ability to retain information over the long term, end quote. And this is the typing quote. Quote, the automatic nature of typing requiring less cognitive effort may explain why typing is often less effective for tasks that require detailed processing and memory encoding. Overall, typing and handwriting both have their benefits and drawbacks. Handwriting is more reflective and forces you to slow down, and typing is more efficient and faster. This whole video was inspired, honestly, by 1984. This book and the use of the SpeakWrite has just made me reflect a little bit more on the act of handwriting and physically picking up a pen and a piece of paper and writing with my hand. And I don't know, I just wanted to look into what goes on in your mind when you're handwriting versus typing. And I think you should want to handwrite more because it improves your processing of the information and understanding of the material. It forces you to slow down and really think about what you're doing. It connects you to your ancestors and the way that they used to communicate, and it's meditative. A few years ago, I had realized that I hadn't been handwriting in like who even knows how long. It was during my time in college, kind of along the time of when I was getting my first internships. Oops, my ring light just went out. I just wanted to handwrite more, so I decided that I was going to journal for every day that year, every single day. And I did. It was super fun. I loved it. It was a chore from time to time, sure. But I think overall, It was always just so fun to get home, wind down by opening my journal to a blank page and just filling it with literally anything that I wanted. My thoughts, my feelings, my jokes, memories, genuinely anything. Now I have written record that I exist. I have physical proof that I went through these things, and I have something to go back to when I'm feeling nostalgic or just want to see where I was during that point in my life. It helped me put my thoughts into words and express my emotions in a safe space just between me and the pages of my journal. If journaling isn't your thing or it feels too performative, honestly, you can start a commonplace book. Commonplace books are basically like journals, except you carry them around with you all the time, and you just use it as like a notebook. If you have an appointment that you need to remember, write it down in your notebook. If you saw a quote somewhere, write it down in your notebook. If you meet somebody and you get their information, write it down in your notebook. A commonplace book is literally just for anything. So that's a really easy way to kind of get the benefits of journaling without having it be like performative, if that's something that you're worried about. Or you can even carry a small pocket notebook. My boyfriend does this, and he originally started it for his work so he can take down notes during his day to make sure that he can go back to whatever he needs to go back to. But since then, I think he just uses it for whatever, kind of like a commonplace book. So just get like a pocket-sized notebook and just carry it around with you. Or you can even set aside some time to handwrite letters and notes to your friends. I'm sure your friends will be ecstatic if they get a handwritten letter from you in the mail. Nobody does that anymore. And it really shows how much time and effort you set aside to either tell them that you love them or even make them giggle a little. Nothing has to be super sentimental if that's not your thing. This is my call for you to ditch your notes app and pick up something physical and write. God damn it. I think something that has been lost to this generation is how personal writing on paper is. Using a stylus and a tablet can still be efficient, and in certain contexts, it makes sense. However, it removes the personality from your handwriting, and it becomes this weird middle ground of whatever the AI model deemed as correct and your handwriting. It feels really weird, and I hate it. One of my favorite things to do when I was in elementary school was to change up how I wrote. I have a distinct memory of looking down at my hand and being like, you know what would eat? If I wrote my M's like this. And I did for a while. I thought I was eating. I thought I did something there. But needless to say, it was kind of ugly, and I reverted back to the way that I was writing my M's before. But again, my handwriting felt so personal and connected to who I was that I was just able to make those changes and do what I thought felt right in the moment. No two people write the same. It's like a fingerprint or your voice. It's distinctly different from everybody else and uniquely you. Your handwriting, your penmanship can say just as much about you as your playlists or your favorite reaction memes. Today, when I see somebody's handwriting for the first time, I feel like I'm unearthing a part of their personality that I may not have ever seen before. I find penmanship to be incredibly beautiful, and I really do hope that I've convinced at least one person to pick up a pen and a notebook and start writing physically, because we all know that we need at least a little bit more beauty in this world.